and we are live. So, welcome to Youth Rugby Discussion. This podcast focuses primarily on youth rugby, non contact mixed gender in Northeast US. All right, so what we're going to do is let's just go ahead and introduce ourselves. We're going to do this from the top of the order on Discord and down. Who's up?
Hey, so this is Coach Alan from Rentham Barbarians.
So good from Mass Youth Rugby.
Hello, this is Chris, Rugby Dad.
And I guess that would be me, Daniel Mejia. I coach for the Rentham Barbarians.
Daryl Jackson, formerly USARugby Rugby Development Officer, and now with Centaurs.
It's Pete Finneran, Shaggy from the South Shore Sharks.
Coach Steve with Rentham Barbarians.
Skylar from the Boston Irish Wolfhounds.
Okay. And what we're going to be talking about today is basically back to rugby. We do have a special guest that'll be able to help us talk about USA Rugby Reorg, a little bit into the club and MIAA landscape also, and return to play guidelines. But before that, let's go ahead and jump to what we usually do, and that is news. So let's go ahead and transition. Anybody have any rugby related news? Anybody?
Not a lot of news in this cycle. I will bring attention that last we talked, we were a month away from there being real live professional rugby in New Zealand. We are now just over 2 weeks away from New Zealand interprovincial or teams playing each other, and we're really thrilled to have rugby back in just over 2 weeks. That's big news for us.
Yeah, lots of international rugby communities coming out with their own return to play guidelines. So that is very exciting. Everybody's looking at what they can practically do, and each country has kind of a different circumstances. So I was just looking over the IRFU in Ireland's return to play protocols, and so it's all looking pretty good. I mean, so I guess right now we're hoping, at least with the UK ones, that the fall will be something that we can look forward to. So yeah, so there's that.
Yeah, and one thing on that, it is unfortunate that all international rugby for the summertime has been canceled. They need time to get ready and train together and that sort of thing. So all the internationals that were intended to be this summer are all canceled. That's a bummer, but we still will have rugby in the summer. That's good. And on that return to play guideline, Daryl, the USA Rugby did release some return to play guidelines today. I think we're going to talk about it later, but really comprehensive. I thought it was well organized, well structured. I think they did a really good job with it, and we could talk about that for a long time. So I'm not going to take up the time on the news talking about, because we will get into that discussion and we won't come out. So, but really, really encouraging news. Even if we don't know when we're going to be back to play, we sort of know how we're going to be back to play, and that's a step in the right direction.
Okay, is that pretty much it for news?
I heard. I think it's someone's birthday. Rugby player somewhere, maybe.
Skylar,
I don't know who though.
Skylar, do you have any info on that?
To Joaquin de la Vega from the Argentina Sevens team.
Well,
that's also the time zones messed this up, but it's also Richie Mwonga's birthday. He's an All Black, but it's time zone. So for him, it was yesterday. But it's
Our perspectives don't really matter. Americans.
yeah.
good. So Daniel, are we gonna make this a segment? I mean, we could definitely make the Skylar knows everybody's birthday a segment, or sure, you could probably list off who else's birthday has happened this week. But big news: Richie Mwonga, all black fly half, and Joaquin de la Vega, Argentinian sevens player. Whew. Big week for birthdays.
for
I think it'd be
birthdays.
great to have a two-column birthday thing, though, where Skylar has the teams I like, people's birthday, and teams I'm less fond of, people's birthday. Because I think this could take 20, 30 minutes to get through the whole list.
I'm not gonna do it week by week. I could probably manage something. Like, all right, here's all the Argentinians, all the Irish guys, all the Kiwis, all the Welsh guys.
It'll
I
be
don't
what's that game, the seven degrees of Kevin Bacon. It'll be the 7 degrees of Skylar. She can link people.
7
Birthdays
of
or
Skylar.
7 birthdays of Skylar. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
but then like if I miss someone, I'll feel bad.
Yes, that is true. So you know what? That's a good reason perhaps to rethink that. All right. Any other news relevant to youth rugby in the Northeast now?
Yeah, so the Free Jacks have launched a virtual Learn to Play rugby program. It's a 4-week
Yes.
program, engaging virtual experiences for boys and girls of all ages to learn about the game of rugby. So this officially started yesterday, and it's nice to see the Free Jacks taking the lead on this and running this. So it's we've had a couple of Free Jacks on the shows, and those guys seem to be great. They definitely want to get themselves into the local community and help out where they can. So it's nice to see them putting programs like this together.
That's amazing. So it's such a needed thing right now.
So
Yeah.
yep, go.
Oh, I was going to say, and it's free. So
Yeah,
it's definitely free. So
I was bummed out. We missed it yesterday. Yeah, on the next one.
So actually, this is good that this is brought up. I forgot that this was a thing. It doesn't matter that you missed it yesterday. It's once a week, and it is a set of videos and a set of exercises and drills and activities, including them asking for you to send videos into them for how you're doing with the challenges that they are giving. So you didn't miss a webinar. You did not miss, it was not a set time. Now, I think they were talking about having something like that as part of the 4-week program. But the 4-week program is basically every week they release new activities and videos tied to that for anybody. And at this point, it looks like it's very, if you are not, so, if you haven't been doing rugby, if you don't know what rugby is, it's definitely starting at that level. So you can hand it to your cousins, your friends, whatever, for them to do. Now, if you've been doing rugby for a while, like Skylar, it would be fun to just participate and do it. But yeah, folks, I definitely, I encourage you, particularly since parents are going to be looking for activities and things to do. It's fun that maybe you're not the one telling the kids go outside. You can say, hey, look at Free Jack, look at the professional rugby player. Go do what they are sort of asking you to do. So Shaggy, you didn't miss anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good because I went and signed up and I didn't see any time, so I got a little figured it was just something I had to catch. Oh, that's good to know.
Yep, exactly. All right. All right. Any other news? We're good with that? All right, fantastic. So let's go ahead and move on. Let me go ahead and bring the main topic over here. And it is back to rugby. So we are very lucky today. We have a guest. We've had guests in the past, and we've been very lucky with them. And today we've got Bill Good from Myro. And I was looking at Bill's sort of bio, and it just went on and on and on and on. And then I also know Bill from with Boston for a long time, so I'm familiar with Bill from that, and I'm sure there's lots of stuff that I could his background I could begin to try to fill in, but perhaps I could stay away from some of that. Bill, do you wanna say hello so we get used to your voice, and give us a little bit about what do you do right now in relation to youth rugby in the Northeast?
First of all, can anybody hear me? Problems with
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but when you were, I think when you were close to the computer and speaking, I think it sounded great at that point.
Okay, we'll see how we do anyway.
Okay, you
Keep our
sound
fingers
great.
crossed.
You sound great.
Okay, so I'm with Mass Youth Rugby Organization, or MyRo, everybody on this call. I've been with the organization since it was founded. And right now, given the coronavirus pandemic, we're not doing much active. There's nowhere to go. I think the Free Jacks doing the work online is a great thing for us. Engage with the game. What I have been involved with, though, for the last few months is the USA Rugby decision to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and reorganize their corporation. I have been for the last 4 years one of the youth representatives on the USA Congress. See, it was the end of April. A vote was taken on a proposal by the board of directors to dissolve the corporation as it existed, suspending the bylaws and rewriting them. And they are in bankruptcy court in Delaware, which is where the corporation papers were filed. And they are hoping to be through that process by the end of July, and the planning will be underway for how they reorganization, is going on now. How they attempt to get reorganized, depending on what the medical opinions are. It started in the fall, basically. The summer activities are pretty much all canceled, either nationally with a national team, tours and so forth, tournament. Team is doing, and states, even those that are starting to return, are still in the early phases. I don't think any consequence on the rugby age level September. In terms of the organization itself, the short version is that the 3 community rugby branches are youth and high school and club are basically to be forming community councils. Those community councils are to be authorized to run the game. Their groups, they will be part of USA Rugby, but they will have much more autonomy than they have in the past. And for example, the college conferences are doing a lot of reorganizing, not much of which doesn't have anything to do with bankruptcy or the virus. The NSCRO college division, National Small College Rugby Organization, now rebranded itself as National Rugby and is starting to do an HD2 team. Planning to do that for some time. That's well underway. Still unclear exactly how it's going to go. The other college division and club school will stay as part of USA Rugby, but it's likely that they will form their own corporations, and there are already steps underway to aggregate all of the funding, because that's been one of the problems in the past. It's that money that came in from the community players at all levels was being used to cover costs, either unanticipated costs or costs where there were problems with the revenue stream or the international. That's happened in past year in Japan, with the sevens in 2017 in California, and back to the previous World Cup in 2000. history of problems there, and it was pretty clear that it was not going to be solved by just trying to put another Band-Aid on it as had been done. People have any questions about that or want, I won't go into any more detail than you want, but I will give you as much information as you have some questions.
So, well, Bill, with the reorganization, we're looking at a youth and high school, basically small company that's going to be a sub faction of USA Rugby. How are representatives from the youth going to be determined that are going to be in that organization?
There are going to be, so I mentioned there are going to be 3 community councils, and there'll be a 4th council from the international players. I'll just consider them a community council. They are a community, a much smaller one. Each of them will have a role to play in terms of managing their organization and representing their communities through the national office. In high school, we're going to be divided into 7 regions. These are administrative regions, not competitive regions. The Northeast, from here down to Pennsylvania, Delaware. Maryland starts the Southeast, going down to Georgia, and across to the Ohio River, I think it is, before it becomes the Mississippi. And then Florida, Texas, the states around the Gulf of Mexico, and I think Oklahoma and Arkansas are in there as well. That's the South. And there's a central, there's a mountain, and then there's a northwest and southwest. So those 7, each of them will have, each of those SRO groups will elect 1 representative to the, so that'll be 7 members, and then there will be 4 other members who will be elected by all 46 of the state rugby organizations in a vote of president, a vice president / clerk, treasurer, and a member at large. Those elections are due to be held probably within a month. And there'll be 1 vote per SRO in the regions. And when the national elections are held, there's going to be some proportional voting, so that that was a compromise, not a compromise, well, the compromise, but there was always this issue of whether we were going to have a senatorial type representation where every SRO got the same representation, or like a House of Representatives one where population became a factor. But the problem was the discrepancies get very, very large. If every player in, well, Massachusetts has a smaller population than Los Angeles County, but you can't anticipate that you're ever going to get to equity among the SROs. So the idea was to allow for some proportional representation, but to cap it. So regardless of the fact that California might be 40 times the membership of smaller state of Rhode Island or a New Hampshire in our region, they still can't have more than 3 votes. That's the max in any state.
Yeah, that works out for us anyway up here. So that's all good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and we have 10 states, I think, if I might, 6: New England, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania.
So Bill, you mentioned that these are sort of administrative regions, right?
We
They're
lost
not.
Bill.
Oh, is Bill completely gone?
So I know that they're at that upper level where you're going to have 4 representatives from the international core, one from men's, 1 from women's 15s, and 1 from men's, 1 from women's 7s. And then youth and high school is only getting 1. College is getting 1, and then adult men's and women are getting 1. do you anticipate that that one representative will be able to represent everyone across the country at the various levels that you kind of mentioned, like with California? And do you feel that everyone's going to be able to be that one person will be able to represent everyone's interests?
Well, it's a very good question, but I think that you have to look at, not that that person has to represent everyone's interests. They have to represent the combined interests of the group, keeping in mind that that me, did I do something wrong there?
Nope, we're good. We're good.
Okay, sorry. Keeping in mind that each of these regions have its council. Now, they may not be terribly active, at least in the beginning, in terms of the issues that they would have, but you have those 7 people who are going to be representing their regions to the community council, the youth and high school community council. And so it's going to be the responsibility of the person who is going to the board to bring the perspective and the issues of the entire group. One of the things that's going to be much better here than the previous system was that then you had one delegate for the entire community rugby ship with 3 very distinct sectors. And clearly you're going to have situations where what's good for club is not good for college to high school, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's not a simple job, but because each of the community councils is going to be largely responsible for management and operation of its own group, there will be fewer issues that will go up to the national level where there's likely to be a lot of disagreement in the various sectors about specific issues. It's not one that will take on a national importance. Rugby clubs, players get in arguments because what they do, but 30 plus years of watching that. But I think from a governance point of view, this will be a much cleaner operation than we had in the past.
Yeah, I think we make out in a lot of different ways with with the new governing body under USA Rugby, and we as a whole we are having actually more representation because there's less people involved in the decision making process of the USA Rugby. Even though, like you said, Bill, I mean most decisions, most problems that will affect us, I'm sure will be worked out within the youth and high school body. So I mean, I think it's great. I think it's a good step forward. Obviously, USA Rugby is there was just too much in one spot. There needed to be this division. So I'm hopeful for this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Shaggy. It's a much more, it puts the decision making much closer to the ground, where the work is going on, where the players are playing, coaches. That's important. And the other thing that it will do is it will allow each of the divisions to look at what's in its own best interests, or each of the communities. For example, USA Youth Rugby, youth and high school rugby, has been subsidizing to some extent the insurance for the other divisions, because games from USA Youth are clearly less in terms of frequency and less in terms of intensity, the nature of the injury. So despite that, we were paying the same amount of money for insurance per player as the club player. So with age branded insurance, one of a better term, or age defined insurance, we'll have lower premiums, and that will work to our advantage. We will also have higher dues. Expect, how much yet, because those figures are still being worked out. We'll have higher dues because, in the same way that we were subsidizing the insurance from the other parties, $5 per kid was not covering all of the costs that were involved just in managing the operation, the share of the operation, even though share, but the share of the operation that was going back to youth rugby. So there'll be some trade-offs, but I am hopeful that the net cost will not increase significantly, at least during the next coming year.
Well, even if it does a bit, and this new organization creates more, it would be, in my mind, be more apt to put more into the game, even though dues are going to be going up. I think that's a fair trade-off.
It's a very good point, because the money, in effect, the money stays home. Right. Absolutely. The big thing is it won't go. Always been on the books that community rugby money was not to be used to subsidize the international team, but that was on paper, not necessarily in action, and we saw that last year with all of the various clubs that were owed money by USA Rugby because they'd held money from club dues to cover unexpected or under budgeted. I shouldn't say unexpected. They paid within their expense and didn't have the revenue to cover them. So money was diverted to that, and that was one of the things that triggered this whole action.
So, Bill, if there's going to be this reorg, or there is this reorg, and with this reorg, there's going to be perhaps some different alignment of the funds. They're going to be used slightly differently. And you mentioned, or it has been mentioned, that a disproportionate amount of money was going to support international play, as I understand. Correct me wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks. Now, if a lot of what's going on right now is going to be fixing some of that, and as you said, there'll be more. Perhaps there will be, or maybe I'm leading the question. I don't mean to say that. But if there's going to be this reorg, do you have an idea? Have you heard, maybe not formally, but have you heard discussion as to how perhaps more funds will be making their way towards youth? How, in what form? Like what could that be? More staff, better supported X, Y, and Z. Does my question make sense? If not as much money is going to be going to international play and more.
I'm sorry. Please finish it. My bad.
No, that's fine. I think you're catching what I'm trying to say is if not as much money is going to be going to international, and more is going to be staying home at the local SRO, local area union, whatever, and is more going to be staying with youth. And have you heard of sort of examples of how that money will be staying in with youth?
Okay, it's a great question, but you're not going to like my answer.
Okay, but it's an answer we need to know, right? And be prepared for.
Yeah. So most of the money for the international team comes either on the 7 side through the USOPC during the Olympic years,
Okay.
and on the 15 side from World Rugby during the World Cup year. And for the women and the men, obviously, the World Cup, those are different years. There is also a significant amount of money that gets raised for the international philanthropically or from commercial sponsorship through the national office. And I think people are familiar with the Golden Eagles money that they raise. It used to be just for the men's team. Now they've been pretty active that as well. So it's not as though dues money has been going to, hasn't been supposed to. It got diverted there, and there was shortfall. The accounting system is going to prevent that from happening. But if you go back and look at the money that was actually coming out from USA Rugby's point of view, there are 40,000, or call it roughly 40,000. A little bit high because it may count some of the coaches and officials. But it's not too far off the mark. You go down to 35. But now just multiply that times $5. That's not, do you want to help me with the math? 200,000 if it's 40? What do I do with that? Okay. That is a
Good,
yes.
Bill. Keep going. Yes.
It's
Yes.
something
No,
that-
we're all muted listening carefully, but yes, your math is fantastic. Typical rugby player
you.
quality.
I just have trouble with the adding up scores if the conversions aren't made. Anyway, the point being that that's not a lot of to start with. So there's not going to be a lot of money that suddenly becomes available. It's more going to be a question of the youth community being able to look for ways to raise its own money. Again, I mentioned the idea of the corporation being protection by allowing the money to stay in the youth community. It also allows the SROs to become a large enough unit that they can be identified nationally, which hasn't been the case before. So the potential to go after sponsors, particularly sponsors, regional sponsors, or even national sponsors interested in an athletic youth population, is something that we are hopeful within a year or two, as first you get organized and then you start to look at where can you go to develop the need. Those are going to be ways that funds can be raised. But in terms of there being money to be redistributed within USA Rugby, no, it's just not there.
I think to some
See
level
more.
Oh, sorry, Bill, carry on.
No,
Carry on.
all I was going to say is I'm afraid we're going to see more of, I don't want to call them shortfalls, but we're going to see limits to growth because of what's happening with the coming school year. I have concerns about parents being willing to let their kids play rugby, so they're absolutely sure that the risk of coronavirus is no worse than the risk of any other a severe cold or allergies or other kinds of illnesses that are carried by through the air by drop. I think that's just another issue that's going to. It's kind of like piling on here. If things weren't bad enough.
But it seems to be a state by state viewpoint on how seriously we need to take social distancing as well. Obviously, we all saw photographs over the Memorial Day weekend of people who don't seem to know what 6 foot looks like or what a face mask is. So yeah, but I hear you. I think that's a valid point. I guess working on the principle that everything will be great and all things will come back together and the world will be fine. It'll all be done by September, so we're all back in normal mode by then. And I appreciate that's very heavily fingers crossed. I guess for me, I mean, what I'm looking forward to when I hear that the USA Rugby is breaking off the youth side of things is accountability from the youth side. Because I know before when we worked, and Bill, you and I have talked about this a lot, for us, USA Rugby represented, of course, the national team, which we all support, but then predominantly at a more granular and transactional level, insurance and liability insurance. So that's really what they were about as far as we were concerned. And obviously we had Daryl in his capacity helping grow in the state. But what I'd hope is with more focus on an organization who's solely responsible for youth, that they will have a bigger impact on helping us grow the game. And to me, dues moving up and us paying a bit more, that's okay if we see real benefit back. So I'm looking for accountability and performance against the accountability as my outcome, as opposed to them giving more money back to us. I don't know whether you have any insights in that.
Well, I can tell you that that's very widely shared. The idea being that if you complain about someone else doing the job and not doing it well, particularly in a case like this where they're spread far too wide. I think Shaggy's mentioned that already. So now you say we're gonna reduce the range of responsibility. We're going to in the hands of people who are committed to that particular sector of the game. And we're going to allow them to identify ways that they can improve the service for the kids and also, for the coaches. We think that one of the side benefits of this is going to be much better access to coaching and referee training, much more focused coach development courses, and the ability to get them delivered. One of the first things being talked about is getting more certified coach and referee educators who are World Rugby certified through USA Rugby, but getting more of them in each of these 7 regions so that you don't have to wait for somebody who's available in Chicago to fly in to run a level 300 coach. We've been fortunate in the Northeast. We have a lot of coach educators, referee educators, but in other parts of the country, that's a huge. So yeah, I think it's going to play itself out in a variety of ways that will affect the performance, not just of the players on the field, but of the adults on the side. I think is very important to have credibility.
There can be nothing better for rugby than improving the coaching and refereeing and helping everyone get better. So I'm a firm believer that the day you don't need educating, it's just too late for everything. So yeah, that sounds fantastic. If looking forward to that really taking place.
Now, Bill, you started talking a little bit about like a very significant thing that's affecting us right now, COVID, Corona, and the parents. How many kids are going to show up? Once the states start opening up, are the parents going to feel comfortable enough to have the kids come out? And I think that's a great thing we definitely want to hit the return to play, and with it the guidelines. But I love what you were talking about a second ago. So before maybe we move to something like that, um, do you see, due to this reorg, any other significant impacts and ideally, beneficial impact to youth rugby in general, or even specifically to the Northeast? So basically, USA Rugby Reorg is happening. Hey, what does that mean to USA Rugby specifically? Youth rugby up here in the Northeast or tomorrow. What does that mean specifically? And particularly, what are the benefits? Do you see any great benefits that we can take advantage of?
So again, I don't want to, if I don't sound optimistic about it, because I am optimistic about the long-term benefits of it. Okay? But in the immediate short term, I think that the single biggest thing is in the next year, youth rugby is going to be, the administration of youth rugby is going to be about serving coaches first always, then coaches, parents, referees, administrators in the youth game. Just the fact that you're going to have a region where people are going to be talking to each other, going to be opportunities for just maybe quarterly meetings among the SROs are going to be rebranded as SGB, state governing body. And there's going to be emphasis on broadening the base, getting more participants out of underserved communities in a lot of the cities, getting far more girls playing, making sure that there are opportunities all the way up the line. All of the high performance stuff is going to go with the international folks, basically. But we're looking at standards for academies so that you can't have the George's Rugby Academy and Storm Door Company come in for the summer and run programs and charge hundreds of dollars for kids for a program that's not been properly credentialed or provided. So there are a number of things that I think will be beneficial over a period of time, but I don't think you're going to switch turned and all of a sudden it's going to look all that different. Not at least for the first 12 months. That's my.
I am a super optimist, and this whole like what I see happening because of this reorganization is more far more emphasis on recruiting at the younger ages, because just being within high school, that entity by itself is going to really uh, need to focus, for its own for its own benefit on recruiting and developing. And obviously with the focus on underserved areas and girls and just expanding the game. I think it's going to really just being, having that entity and that governing body being so focused, might not, maybe year one where everything's kind of getting sorted out, and everyone's just trying to make normalcy happen. Maybe nothing great will happen, but I think over a couple of years we're gonna there's gonna have to be pushes put on by the cross state lines, through the entity, but the governing body by itself, that's really gonna help us. I just don't see how this is going to be excellent for the flag and middle school and younger, or like freshmen, high school rugby players. It's gonna be great.
Let me be clear. I've never been accused of being excessively optimistic, but I completely agree with you. I just think, and you just said it, I think it's just going to take some time. That's all. But I'm all for it. Just don't want people thinking that, things get reorganized in September and all of a sudden things will be changed by January. That's all. It's just going to take some time. I think that the model is 100% better. Absolutely. Do I think that the commitment is going to be better because people are going to get re-energized by the fact that there's a new organization, new opportunity, and hopefully in a perverse way, even the COVID-19 will have gotten people to the point where they want to see it, get back engaged, be more active about it. So I think opportunity is there. I absolutely agree with you.
Just in case any of our listeners get worried, it's still COVID-19, Bill. We haven't
Oh
lost.
yeah, that's right.
You're talking
I
about
lose
the
track every now
earlier
and I lose
version.
track every now and then.
Yeah, no.
All right. So, speaking of COVID, whichever version you like best, 19 in this case, we started teasing going back to rugby, and what are some of the guidelines that are out there. So obviously there's your state guideline, there's the USA guideline, um, and the two kind of, in local also SROs. So all three kind of have to come together to be able to give us some sense of perhaps what we're going to be able to provide and when. So if there's any more USA Rugby Reorg discussion, we can keep going, but I think it probably is a good segue to start talking about the return to play guidelines. Now I've been taking all the guidelines that I can find. I've been throwing it up on Discord. The only one that I really had a chance to look at, the other ones I was doing while I was trying to get other things done, so it didn't have my full focus. I know the Rhode Island one, which unfortunately doesn't help me very much with knowing what the Massachusetts one is, but I did find one thing, and that is that I was frustrated that Rhode Island's seemed very clear. It had a visual, they even put out a visual guideline for it, in which it is stated that each group could have no more than 15 youth associated with it, that each adult that was tied to that group had to stay with that group for the entire day, and also the entire, now this was for mostly for camps, summer camps, but they did say that it applied to sports also. So the coach that's with 15 children has to stay with those children through the course of the whatever, whether it's camp or sessions or clinics, whatever it is, and that each group of 15 kids plus one adult cannot get closer then I think it was 15 feet from another group. So basically pods with one coach per pod. So I can offer that as a guideline to Rhode Island. I checked in Massachusetts and it basically just said phase 2 team sports. It didn't say much more than that. So what do we have for guidelines? So do you know what the guidelines are? Um,
Explicitly.
what's that?
Yeah, yeah. I was being somewhat facetious saying explicitly, but yeah, there's a little more detail on the MassGov website. It's not always immediately easy to find, but they offer a table showing the 4 phases of reopening Massachusetts, and under phase 2, the cautious portion, they do talk about opening up youth sports in a limited fashion without necessarily going into great detail. But slightly further up that same page, when they start talking about the numbers of people involved, they do talk about that as being to be determined. And so I think what they're trying to suggest is that they don't really quite know where we are just yet. And until we have a better sense of that, we're going to need to be somewhat cautious and receptive to guidance as and when it happens. But certainly for phase 1, it's still less than 10. And now I was looking at, oh, here we go. Yeah, so phase 1 is less than 10. Phase 2 is to be determined based on trends. And then phase 3, which is when we get closer to sports that we'll recognize, is simply to be determined based on trends. What's been truly difficult, I think, though, is determining where does rugby truly sit on the MA view of this world. And because it doesn't talk about contact sports versus non-contact sports, or team sports on a field versus team sport or individual sports across either side of a net. And so in that respect, it's been a little challenging. I think that what they've probably done, and I'm guessing here, so I truly don't know, and if I'm guessing correct, they've been quite smart, is they're assuming that organizations such as USA Rugby, who have a better insight into the sport itself, can provide better, more specific guidance.
Makes
And I think
sense.
the documentation you sent today, Daniel, was good, because it did go that little bit further. Now, some of the guidance I felt was will be hard to follow. I'm excited to see which kids want to sign up to a training program where we're not allowed to actually share a ball with them. I'm guessing that's fitness training, and I just can't see too many flag players being willing to go for those, that 40-minute hike or jog behind their coaches, 6 feet apart.
Giant inflatable armor balls.
Yeah, well, no, but they have
Right.
to bring their own, though, Shaggy. That you're not allowed to have a
Right.
team armor ball. It has to be their own personal armor ball.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't want to carry your armor ball.
Yeah,
Hey,
I mean, isn't that known as a car, though? And most of these kids have cars. No, in all seriousness, I mean, obviously, it's great that we're getting guidance finally, because
Yep.
it's been, what do we do? When do we do it? And
Yep.
hurry up and wait. And I think now we're seeing some line of sight. But of course, the number one thing we keep forgetting in all this is that the phase plans we're seeing all assume that each phase is cleared with 3 weeks of continually reducing cases. And so we're in week 2 of just starting week 2 of phase 1 in Massachusetts, and of course the trend is down. But as we start to see relaxing of the social distancing and the opening up more businesses, it'll be important to monitor what's going on in those cases, because the phase 1 failures will kick through in phase 2, and
Yep.
that'll have hurt us in phase 3.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's also going to make it a little bit nebulous is, specifically for our concerns in youth rugby. Yeah, we are rugby, but for myself and a lot of us, it's flag rugby. So the guidelines are probably going to be significantly different if it's 7 versus 15. I can see there being perhaps a difference between 15s versus 7s, and definitely between full contact and flag. So I think I don't want I don't want to foresee myself getting really frustrated, but I just, unless these guidelines are really, really, really clear, it's going to be really tough to figure out where flag falls in all of this, and then where sevens contact falls into it. And I think USA Rugby also put out their guidelines. Was it today? I know I found it today, and I
Yeah,
posted it.
they were put out today. You're correct.
So Bill, do you and I mean I did my best to go through this and I got my knuckles rapped by Alan who actually did a much better read than I did on this. But do you have some vision? Have you had more time to digest this, and do you perhaps have an idea of how flag might what's the path for flag and what's the path for sevens and contact?
Well, I have, I obviously the Massachusetts ones just came out, so I haven't had much more time than anyone else to look at those. But I have been looking at some of the other ones from other organizations, even other countries. Darrell mentioned the IRFU one. I'll tell you who has a great one, just from a point of view of the visual and the way they present it, is Switzerland. If you have a chance to look at that nice chart, they also talk about consequences. I was on a call, well, actually, it wasn't a webinar. It was a presentation. It was all one-sided. Responses from two physicians and a scientist from the CDC. It's available through a link in the CDC. I'm going to put it up on our website tomorrow. But it talks about the limitations, the circumstances, and part of the issue is that they are not being sport specific in the same way that the physicians don't want a dozen of us to be discussing, the medical aspects of COVID-19. They don't want to step in and say, for volleyball you do this, for badminton you do that, for flag rugby you do this, for softball you do that. I think the best we're going to get from them is going to be something similar to what the National Federation of High School Sports did when theirs came out recently. And that is, they categorize the sports into high, medium, and lower risk based on the amount of physical contact and the nature of the activity. So I think for a while that's going to be the best we get. But I think the big thing is, until you start to get into the phases, and what USA Rugby suggests is that they have 5 stages, but they tell you very early on, first or second page, that you need to align those with whatever the regulations are and the status is in your state. So clearly we're going to be behind some other states where there's been much lower incidence of disease reason, but the risk you have obviously is of a resurgence. That one of the reasons that, and it was pointed out on the CDC call, you mentioned the kids all having to stay together in one group with one coach.
Yes.
And the reason for that is tracking. If you've got the same 10 kids, you've got them every day, and you're the coach and they're all the same players, then when one of them gets sick, there are other people you need to check, not 55 that might have been at the practice. So there is a rationale for all of it. And they also talked about things that I think will be extremely, as I haven't gone through the USA Rugby. If anybody studied it more carefully than I have, please jump in. But one of the other things they talked about was the issue of checking every child, every player before practice starts. And they have like roster sheets, for want of a better way to describe them, with the name and I think 7 or 8 questions that you ask or observations you make about symptoms. And they strongly encourage kids' temperatures being taken when they start. And a lot of that is just not practical. People are going to have to at least be aware of it, knowledgeable about it, and do the best they can in terms of adding to the risk of the kids. And we all know how that's problematic for the younger kids anyway. And then when you add in the relatively high percentage of asymptomatic individuals,
Oh
who
yeah,
test
yeah, those are
positive.
scary.
Yeah, that's just you do everything right, and you still can have a kid infect 3 other three of his or her team. So it's really tough. But I think that part
Yep.
of the reason I think that you're not getting more specificity is it's a little bit too early for them to feel confident in saying rugby players do this, football players do that, lacrosse players do this.
Now, do you foresee them leaving that to the individual sports themselves? So giving, as you said, higher level guidelines and saying within this frame, you sports out there, make good decisions about how you're going to incorporate all this. Do you think that's something that they're going to do? Are they going to go the route of spelling out for each individual sport, or do you think they're going to, say, hey, Myro, Bill, why don't you guys, take these general guidelines and figure out what's the best way to then parser that out to your sports?
I I think they're going to give general guidelines the various stages. So is what, and this is close to pure speculation, just for the record here, okay? But I think that
Yep.
Same way that we've talked about levels and stages, states are doing, the CDC is talked about, for their return to play. Um, you know, they they have they don't do so much levels as they talk about things that you have to identify, things you have to be concerned about. How do you encourage your kids not to do high fives, not to wipe their noses and then grab the ball? How do you make sure that they don't share water bottles? All of those kinds of things. And then when it comes to the playing, it's one question was asked. Um, it was about, I believe it was a football coach, not surprisingly in terms of just fortunes, but contact and the implications of contact. And the doctor said, well, maybe you just do contact days of the games. Well, as coaches, that's not a practical response. But from her perspective, he's just saying, if you're going to engage with these 3 days a week, then just do the contact on the game day, and the other 2 days work on skills and keep them spaced out as much as they can. If there's any little nugget of good news in here, there was an article in the New York Times a few days ago, and I've seen it referenced in other publications, that it seems as though the likelihood of the virus surviving on hard surfaces is the expectancy of the virus surviving has dropped substantially. So that the idea now of sharing a ball, things of that nature, is not quite as risky as it might have seemed a few weeks ago. It's another thing too, is that as more information develops about the virus, there may be other factors that come into play in terms of pro and con for how you get back into full training.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So let me throw another question at you, and maybe you can tackle it now, or we can sort of defer it for a little bit more conversation, then hit it. So with the fact, should have mentioned this earlier, that this podcast does not speak for any body out there, any governing bodies, USA Rugby, any SROs, Maro, anything of the sort. It's just us hanging out, chatting, unless somebody, because we do have people that sit on different boards or have sat on past boards. So we're very lucky to have you, and you did make some announcements, and you did mention that these some of those announcements were formal, but so taking into account that nothing, what I'm asking you is not a formal response in any way whatsoever, but you've probably had to do a lot of thinking about this. Um, how do you foresee, in general, um, rugby coming back to Massachusetts? Obviously, since we're talking about youth here, so talk about sort of flag rugby, and then maybe contact rugby, contact sevens. What do you see as some of like the real considerations, and perhaps some of the real sort of stepping stones that need to be in place, and perhaps some of the things that we haven't considered? And again, not asking you to lay out a plan that's formal. It's just what are some of the things that you definitely foresee as significant steps and things that need to be able, that we need to worry about and have answers for. Does that make sense?
it makes sense, but let me be right off the bat in the same way, we're putting out disclaimers here. There are people on this call who I think have just as much to offer in terms of their experiences, their perspective, and their expectations of what can happen. So I'm not going to, I'll speak very briefly in the hope that some other people will step up on this topic.
Okay, let's do it.
Uh, no, I'll say three things. Number one, I think is education, particularly for parents, has got to be significant. And I think the flag rugby, just because there is less contact, not none, but certainly less, is a way to get kids engaged. The idea of carrying flag up through middle school, which we started to do in Massachusetts, I think is important in that regard. I think that parents have to be reassured that if even if the kids are going to be engaged in activities that bring them close to each other, that the coaches are aware of best practices and are going to do those things about water bottles and washing their hands, having appropriate distances on the sidelines, things like that. There are, just ways to reassure parents and other adults. And I think we're also going to be having to reassure recreation directors and parks department people that, because the magic word, I think, is going to be liability. You talk about people making their own decisions. You say, okay, the CDC recommends this. I don't think that's such a big deal. And then you have 3 kids come down sick, and whether it's because of not following a CDC regulation or something else, you're going to own whatever the consequences are. I think that's, and thank God we're working with a population that so far appears to be better able to handle the most adverse consequences of the disease than other groups. But even now, you see articles about secondary consequences and illnesses. So I think that's something people are going to have to think about long and hard. I don't think anybody's going to step up and say 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, we'll give you another version, and 3 weeks another version, and finally there'll be one that says, oh, this looks just like 2018. We're good to go.
That's a really good point. The whole making sure that every parent is completely aware of the risk that is involved, and not just, they saw the flyers saying, flag rugby starting next week, and they take their carload of kids and dump them off because everybody's been dying to get something to do something. I think your point of liability is really I didn't think about that. Like, so, it makes sense that we're going to have the regular liability forms that everybody has to sign when they sign up, and then we're going to have to put in either a supplementary one or build into a little waiver for what's going on with Corona right now, and maybe clearly state, phase 2, yada yada yada. Make reference to this Massachusetts guidelines, Alan, that you just basically displayed for us. Does that make sense? I didn't think about that. Does that make sense, Alan, Stephen? Is that something we're going to build into now? Our signups?
I think we have to. I mean,
Yep.
I think Bill's absolutely right. We have to look to higher authorities, and it's pretty sad, but it's look to higher authorities and almost lay the blame on them, and but to get their guidance, because in all seriousness, I coach rugby. What would I know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm
I mean,
with you 100%.
when I played rugby, if you picked up a nasty gash, they brought the bucket with the disinfectant in the water and the sponge. And the next guy got his tooth picked out, got the same sponge in the mouth.
Magic
And
water.
yeah,
Sponge,
absolutely.
yeah.
So clearly, things have moved forward a long way. But yeah, what do we know? We're rugby coaches. We're here to coach rugby, not even speak properly. But yeah, I think we have to cover ourselves with liability disclaimers. But as we're seeing with with the coronavirus, it's causing different things for different people. It's not all COVID-19. There's that secondary illness that young kids are getting.
Young kids, yeah.
Very, very rare, it seems, but it's, it looks like Kawasaki's disease, I believe. Touch wood, I'm saying this all correctly and not making something up by mistake. But yeah, there's just so much we don't know. And I think Bill's point earlier on about the asymptomatics, it's what, 4-to-1, 4 times as many people have it as actually display any form of symptoms at all. We have to be hyper cautious, but at the same token, if we all took the attitude of we should never expose ourselves to risk, we would never leave the house. We certainly never would have played rugby. So there is a degree of balance in this as well.
It's definitely baby steps for us. I mean, we have the advantage of not actually being able to open up in the first couple of phases of reopening. So we can take the lessons from the camps that are opening and see how they develop a game plan, and best practices, and how that actually, instead of work in theory, we can see how it develops there, and kind of take that in and develop that to our next baby step. So whatever. I mean, they're going to be doing some kind of physical activity, maybe soccer or tennis, or something that's along those lines in the camps. So from there, we can see what they have done, and kind of morph that into what our best practices can be as well, because that's how we're gonna have to open. We're gonna have to open is not gonna be full on anything when we start back up. Anyways, as clubs, more or less, we're just gonna try to get the kids together and get them doing some kind of rugby related activities, and safely, and do those whatever best practices have been established. Regardless of what the guidelines are, we want to obviously go about things most safest way.
Yeah, I agree too. I think, and Alan, I think hit it on the head where he talked about, we're just rugby coaches, and we don't always think about, the details of the liability, or how to protect not only ourselves but the kids that we're in charge of. And I could probably foresee a return to play, almost a training session. I mean, where you need to bring coaches in or have coaches on a call, where we just, I mean, because it sounds like Bill's had a lot of, direct contact with the CDC and doctors and people to get a lot of really good information, and that information needs to get passed down to coaches as we return to play, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and doesn't destroy everything that we're trying to move forward with. So and I'm always for any opportunity to bring coaches together so that we can get everyone on the same page. So I think that will probably be needed, just to make sure we get everybody on the same page, because we do not want to mess this up. If we mess this up, then the way some states are having it go, if you have to go back 3 steps if you start reporting cases, and I could just see us anyway. I'm liking everything that I hear. I think it all is good. It's the USA one. Looks like it's very nice. It's easy to read. It's very well. It's laid out really well. There's a couple of World Rugby points on there. And I agree with Bill that I can see why they don't want to be very sports. They just want to kind of give you some basic guidelines. But I think just for us to do our own due diligence, and to make sure that we do it right, I think it'll be important to bring our coaches in together right before we get ready to return to play, especially in competition where we're going to have clubs playing other clubs. We need to get everyone together and make sure they're all on the same page.
I think Shaggy made a great point. Sorry, Daniel.
Go.
Which was, if not that every kid goes to camp, but with camp opening up in the phase before we can realistically get to any form of rugby that we'd recognise, the kids get a bit of an education on distancing in a group which is not a family group. I mean, in my own home, we've had some friends, very safely socially distanced from us, but they bring over their children who are the same age as my children, and I see the anguish on all the kids' faces, sitting, 10, 20 feet away from each other, and just desperate to go and give each other a hug. And I can only foresee this going down in a rugby game, or just in rugby training, where we're playing some simple little game just to practice moving around, that the energy levels go up and the contact starts happening. And so anything the kids can get out of camp to learn first is going to help us there, just to get them in the habit, to get them practicing keeping those distances.
And as we've said earlier before, Shaggy and Steven have said this very clearly. At certain stages, just keeping the kids away from climbing all over each other is an accomplishment. So K through 3, just keeping them, not even focused on the drill, but having fun and no longer literally dogpiling on each other. That's an accomplishment. So when we talk about, when you go back to playing, against other clubs, in the back of my mind, I've had this feeling that that's not going to happen for a very long time, and we all want to get out as soon as possible. And so if we're going to get out as soon as possible, it's going to be baby steps. It's going to be like, we joked about it earlier, like, can we even bring a ball? Like, am I as a coach going to have to come up with fun activities? And I have a bunch of them, but I don't have that many that are somewhat rugby related, that are fun to do, but that don't involve a ball, and that everybody has to stay at least 6 feet apart. I got some. But if I can use a ball, then I've got a lot more. So for me, if we were to start practices very, very, very soon, I'd have to bring out those gems where people are not touching each other, they're more than 6 feet apart, and they're staying within pods of 15 kids at a time. And then, as we move on, now I can bring a ball in. Great. We're going to add some more, kicking and passing drills. Well, games, not even drills, games. And all of that building up to actually playing. And before we play any other teams, the pods of 10 or pods of 15, that's the group you're stuck with. You're going to be playing against those kids, for the next however long, until we can begin to get close to other groups. That, Daryl, you said we're gonna, are we gonna bring some coaches together and really get to the bottom of this? Not just what are the guidelines, but in practice, how do you actually make this happen? Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely want that, because I want to know that the next guy, the next person next to me that's coaching kids, has a really clear view of what we should be doing. And as much as I feel that I think I know what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm sure there's a lot of things that I haven't thought about. Everything from logistics to what do I do when I'm not looking, and what I do with the kids when I'm facing the other direction type of situation. Do I position myself completely different now than I would have in the past?
And Daniel, let's do thinking about the youngest group, K through second grade.
Yeah.
We'd even have to break those down to smaller numbers. If I have anything more than 6 kindergartners in front of me that I'm trying to space out, and things where they're spaced apart, not like Bill said, fingers not in your mouth, and then on the ball, and then on the next kid. It would take a little more work and an additional coach or two for some bigger groups to do it.
I have those problems with high school kids. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Steve.
Yeah, and do we need to get into a forum like this and really think this through and just basically say, you know what? If we're starting things in 3 weeks, kindergarten, first and second grade, no, sorry, can't even have those at that phase, because they're just not going to be able to do it. Tackling, can't do it, so let's just not even do that. You know what? The magic number is 5th through 6th. Everybody do only 5th through 6th. Now, I'm throwing it out there as a controversy grenade. But that's, do we need to go to that level of granularity to make sure that this is actually,
Well, thinking outside of the box on that, because I think you do raise a good point. I mean, we always talk about parental involvement, and it seems to me where we have young kids that maybe it's a little harder to get them to do the right thing, a little harder to get them to concentrate, that we can now enlist their parents
that is perfect.
for all the right reasons,
Didn't even
and
think about that.
and then we can indoctrinate them in a rugby way, and and then the world becomes great.
Alan, that is absolutely phenomenal. That is
It's
phenomenal.
taken a long, long time to have a good idea. Many, many decades.
And you know what?
I knew you had it in you.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl.
I love that idea. I'm not sure that it would work. I'll leave that up to Steve to see if he can make that work. But Steve, now you've got 6 kids, and guess what? If you want to be part of this, if you want to be part of this team, there's going to be only 6 of them. And by the way, you also have to show up with an adult that's willing to get some sneakers on, cleats on, and literally be like the shadow to the child. And
We
what
can make it work. I mean, like the youngest age, you break it up into six lanes, and they do drills. They do games, right? I mean, it'd be a parent and child, and you do a game. I have a lot of fun stuff going through my head. I mean, I think we could make it work. At the end, it would be interesting to see how frustrated the child is with the parents' rugby skills. So we have to see how that being. But no, I mean, I think could definitely put something together and present it.
Oh, that'd be
The one thing I was
phenomenal.
going to add is that it almost feels like there's some remote control going on. Is the alignment between the Massachusetts guidelines and the USA Rugby guidelines is eerily good. Yeah, so that whole phase 3 mass guideline versus stage 4 USA Rugby guideline, they're not so radically different. We're not struggling with that contradiction scenario, which would be the absolute worst, where we're getting guidance from one authority saying do A and the guidance from another authority saying do B, and you can't do both. We actually have where mass seems to end up, USA Rugby comes in with some detail. It's very fortuitous.
Oh, that's nice. That's very cool.
Back to your point of bringing the parents in. I mean, our return to play, if we're to get back, as soon as possible, is going to be something like that. It's going to be an aerobics type of situation where there's going to be mimicking. So anyone that's already in a household that we can drag in, I'm sure that would want to be be more apt to be involved, and that would be a safer practice. So if we're even if we're just training, the different families, like because we won't, if we don't have competition to offer for say a month, and yet we can still get back to training. That might not be a bad idea, just to get things going. If we do get the all clear for training and yet no competition, and with group sizes being X, Y, or Z. We can make it work. We just need we need it to be safe, and we need a green light, and I'm sure we'll just figure out something. Giant armored inflatable balls will work
Oh,
right
yeah, I
now,
know.
though. Just
Yeah.
saying, they'll work right now.
I hope you have patented that, and I
there.
hope you're working with an organization somewhere to get those manufactured, because
There's
clearly a
Zorg
thing for you.
balls. There's Zorg balls. They take up. They put them on. The BU had a soccer game. So they wore these giant inflatable balls. They're the upper portion of the body, right? So, and they're just essentially just soccer, but it's soccer we can bump into each
Smash
other.
into each other. Yeah.
I mean,
It's Northern European versus Southern European soccer. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Getting controversial here. Need to move
if
on.
I get rugby players playing tennis, I'm calling it rugby. I mean, at this point, really.
Daniel actually has a really fantastic drill that is basically tennis for rugby players, which you probably can't remember on the spot. But
the bombardment
kicking
one,
drill,
the kicking drill, bombardment.
the kicking drill. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I
an
love that one.
excellent.
That's a lot of fun. Also because you can use it with kids that are either very different in their ability to kick or very different ages, because the targets that your island that you're protecting, if there's people that are not as good a kicker as you, your island's a lot bigger. You're giving everybody else a very large target, and you then also need to defend a much larger space. And then if a much younger child, you'd have their island be a lot smaller. So every other kicker out there has to have much better accuracy, and then the kid has a lot less space they need to cover. So yeah, I love that drill because it really it allows for a lot of movement, a lot of kicking. It's just a lot of fun, and parents can get involved in that one also. So yeah, I'll be more than happy to put more videos on it. But yeah, that's exactly the type of thing we're going to have to start doing is really, really, really going back to your file folder of activities and games and fun drills that, from way back in the day, and really pick and choose the ones that fit that phase of not only, the guidelines, but that phase in your club's plan for going back. And I think a plan is just going to be absolutely critical. Playing against another team, we know it's not going to happen for a long time. But Gina Raimondo, the mayor of Rhode Island, she basically mentioned that if you're going to be in a sports-related camp or sports-related team, and you only have 15 players, you're going to have to come up with rules so you can play against your own, your own pod. You're only playing in your own pod. She said, so you're going to have to do 7 versus 7 with one sub. And I thought, I know a sport that's 7 versus 7.
With the shared sub.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept.
Yeah. So as far as that's concerned, we're doing pretty good because the number of players we have for flag, you could bring it all to that down to like 5 or even 4. But yeah, if you're gonna go play, if barbarians are gonna go play the sharks, if we're gonna go play, wolfhounds, that's different. That's way down the line.
The other thing, actually thinking about it, because I mean, it's very hard to say there are some positives coming out of the coronavirus because there clearly are very, very few. But one very small one, very rugby specific, very North America specific, I think would be that if we are forced to spend more time on kicking drills over the net or whenever we can get out training, it's a good thing for the sport. It's not something I think we excel at here in the US or in the Northeast,
Oh yeah.
as a general rule of thumb. And so, and I think it's because we focus on other parts of the game more and we don't look at tactical kicking. Because in rugby, there's nothing more beautiful than a greatly executed
Oh yeah.
kick and nothing worse than a poor kick.
Yes, absolutely. So you're right. Yeah, you're right. This entire event might be, the one time in history where kicking just flourished. So Bill, you better be ready for some rule change. Rattling of the swords. Rule change requests soon after all this is settled for incorporating kicking at the youngest level.
It'll be a variant of volleyball combined with rugby. I can foresee it already.
I am in.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, rugby, volley rugby or whatever.
Right.
Just call it rugby. That's it.
That's right, Shaggy. Why complicate things,
Reclaim
right?
the sport.
Don't complicate things. Just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. That's funny. So,
Regional tweaks. That's what you call that. Regional tweaks.
So I know we're going to be getting close to winding down here soon. We're at the hour and a half mark. I wanted to turn it back to, it's not so much rugby news, but it's Bill, are you still on?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a story in Golf Rugby Report, and I also I feel like I have a second question about the Golf Rugby Report. Or maybe I'll just ask it. I don't know what Alex Golf's official role is, if there is one with USA Rugby or the Congress, but I find it really interesting that he's kind of got this inside scoop on information that I don't know if the national office is encouraged that he's releasing information or they're not happy that he's releasing information. But anyway, the last story that kind of got me worried was this one that was titled "Conflict Arises During Youth and High School Reorg Plans," and the thing that made me worried about it was that it seemed like it was that his article was about how not so much the old guard, but one of the biggest problems that rugby in America has is that we have so many people with so many different ideas, and we have so many different weather patterns, and because the country is so big, and that we just can't agree on what's the best path forward for youth in high school. And I just wanted you to try to speak to that. I mean, because it sounds like you have pretty good hope that we're going to be able to, sort some of this stuff out. But I mean, I can only imagine that, if I'm going to a meeting and I'm talking from Massachusetts and I'm talking to someone from California, we have completely different weather patterns, and they have a 12-month rugby season and we barely have an 8. How difficult it is to go into those meetings and try to get a general consensus from everyone.
Yeah, that's a very fair question, a very good question. Let me just break it into parts if you don't mind. In terms of Alex Goff, I think Alex does a reasonably good job of presenting the information he's given. But I can tell you that in those 2 articles, there were a large number of factual errors, and I'm not going to blame him because I don't think these weren't the kind of things that say, oh, he misinterpreted or he's presenting a view. They were just facts that were wrong. And but having said that, the last meeting we had was very contentious, and there are at least 2 different perspectives on how we should advance to get a consensus on governance. And we're talking about just governance, not things like seasonality and play. I think that and we're finished with the process, and I hopeful there's a meeting tomorrow night, and if we have a constructive meeting tomorrow night, then I think we'll be going forward without too much more difficulty. Fingers crossed. The issues, the big issues around governance are going to be just making sure that there's appropriate representation, that people feel like, whether or not everything goes the way they want, voice has been heard, and everyone has same interests in seeing the game develop. So, but in terms of his article, yeah, it was contentious. I think, so if I remember correctly, he said toward the end that like we're not quite as bad as they may have appeared in the beginning. Hopeful that that's where we're at. We'll have a better idea the end of the week when we take a vote on what the terms of reference are, which is terms of references are basically I don't know how best to describe it. It's kind of a shorthand version of bylaws. It's operating procedures until we get bylaws. Those get voted on, will be held shortly thereafter, and things will be on. It's contentious, and for a variety of reasons. Some geographic, some approach to the game, some just views of how club should run, how a league should run, how pro should.
Okay. Yeah, because what I'm curious about is if there will be room for room for geographical unions, or I guess they're going to be called state geographical unions or organizations, for them to be able to have at least a little bit of latitude to be able to say, you know what, I can appreciate that on the West Coast you can do certain things, you can do X, Y, and Z, but on the East Coast we simply can't. It just doesn't. It's we would love to be able to do that, but for whatever reason we can't do it. Can we have a little bit of latitude to be able to kind of adjust our season, our schedule, our this, our that, just so that it makes more sense for us? Or is it going to be? I'm guessing they're not going to try to create a one size fits all, make everybody try to fit into that one small box.
No, not at all. I just want to be clear about something, and I if I didn't present this clearly, I apologize. USA Youth Rugby is going to, at least in the beginning, is going to be managing the game for the benefit of the youth game, as opposed to trying to share the growth, development, improvement issues across all aspects of the game, but there's no conversations being held about, one size fits all. There haven't been any discussions about seasonality. There haven't been any discussions about any kind of uniformity yet. The road, there's going to be discussions about it, because if you don't start to standardize the game, you make it tough to move into school systems and things like that. But that's certainly not where now, and we're nowhere near that. And I don't think I apologize if I'm repeating myself. I'm going to see massive changes, except that fundamentally the focus is going to be on the youth game for the youth that are playing.
That makes sense. All right, so as Daryl mentioned, it is getting a little bit late. So if you guys have any more questions for Bill, something that hopefully he can sort of give a little bit of lighter color quickly, fire away. We're very lucky to have him right now. So go ahead and then we'll go right into the wrap up, unless there's no more questions for Bill.
I got one. So, Bill, would you take part in an administrator touch game at a youth jamboree?
Yeah, we're doing 2022.
That's right. We've been trying to get an adult touch game thrown in some of the flag jamborees. So
Sure, absolutely. I'm real good at that 6 feet of distance. I can tell you that.
Yeah, the thing that I love,
Absolutely.
the thing that I really am looking forward to games during youth flag games is if I ever do, I probably won't, but if I do have a breakaway, I only have to run 20 meters to the other to the try line. So I'm loving that. Or if I'm getting really tired, I can just pretend that I got chased out of bounds, and that's only this is for little kids, so it's only 10 meters in one direction. So I got 10 meters in me.
all glory, all glory.
Glory, exactly.
Do you have a sense of, after the reorganization, and I'm thinking that you kind of have an inside scoop, what the national office will look like? I mean, I know everyone says it's going to be smaller, but do you have a sense of what it could and should look like, and who the potential youth and high school czar would be?
Well, see that's one of the things. There won't be a youth and high school czar.
Oh, okay.
That's gonna be in the youth and high school governance structure. There may be a liaison, but there may not. Okay, I think the key functions of the national office are going to be membership, registration, national marketing and promotion, the partnership with the USOPC, the partnership with World Rugby, the development of national sponsors, keeping the game visible on a national level. But I expect there'll be someone who will be a liaison. Right now, Jonathan Atkinson is kind of serving that role. He's working with both the youth and the colleges. They've cut back the staff there so much, but I think they're going to have a significantly reduced staff going forward. You probably know better than me. I'm going to guess there were maybe in the neighborhood of 30 people there, and I'll guess there's less than half of that now. Maybe it'll split somewhere in between.
Yeah, I think it's probably about 9 people now. If you just go to the organizational chart on the website, you've got a lot of people doing double duty, which is going to be painful. So okay. Do you think we'll get? We had to cancel our national development summit. Do you see that coming back, or do you think that's going to get put on the back burner?
I think that's on the back burner, at least for a year. I think what you may see, well, I shouldn't say it. What you might see is an annual meeting where they bring all 3 committee, all three councils together, annual meeting. And if you did that, you could build a nice NDS around that, because you'd have people from all the different levels there. Something like that might be as close as you get to it. That would at least be an opportunity to hold it.
What we have to consider is to maybe just to try to do our own. I mean, Massachusetts is probably the leader in New England. I mean, it just because it's the idea is still sound, and the one that Kenny Forehand designed is still a pretty good one to offer. Coaching courses, all the way 1 through 3, and offer some referee and administrators. I mean, the program is still sound, so maybe it's something that we could just do locally. I mean, and try to see if we, I know the national office doesn't have the money to help us fund it, but it still seems like a worthwhile. It's one of those things where we have to have a good foundation. It built upon our coaches and our administrators and referees, and because without that, we it's hard to drive kids into the game if we don't have enough coaches and we have enough I mean what I'm talking about. So it seems like if we ignore that piece of it, then we're going to end up shooting ourselves in the foot.
I completely agree with you, and it's been said a couple of times before too. One of the things though that it's a thought, and it hasn't been discussed. So as was said earlier, this is my own opinion, not representing anyone, but the fact that we're going to have these regions. If you've got a region from to Pennsylvania and Delaware, you could hold 2 of them in that region. The kind of thing that Kenny wanted to have. Just hold 2 of them there. Have your audience. You'd have not outrageous distances to travel for anybody, and you could bring in a few folks from outside, like he was planning on doing. So I think there's still going to be opportunities. I think we're going to have to doing a lot more, I think, regionally than nationally, both for financial and opportunity reasons.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, guys, we are getting it's going pretty late over here, so let's go ahead and wrap it up. So, Bill, what we do is we go Discord order and just basically last thoughts or shout outs or last things to say, whatever. Just one quick round of last thoughts, and that pretty much we call it after that. So Alan, you're always at the top of the list, so you're always on the hook for it. You got any last shout outs, last thoughts, or anything?
Yeah, that kid Aaron Aardvark at my school always had to go first, though. No, 2 last shout outs. One is finally we're seeing a path back to rugby.
Yep.
And I can't be more excited about that. And then, as ever, the big shout out for the first responders and the health workers who are keeping us all safe at the moment.
Bill,
That's
do you have anything, Bill?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not used to the. Yeah, let me echo what Alan said about the first responders. That's got to be at the top of everybody's list. I just want to thank everybody for having the patience to listen to me a whole large chunk of the last couple hours. And I appreciate enthusiastically, but I still appreciate the questions and the observations. And hopefully we got people feeling a little more informed about things when we started.
Absolutely.
Hey y'all, sorry I've been pretty quiet today. Of course, I echo the our typical shout outs. I won't steal all the good ones, but definitely my Amazon delivery guy has to be thanked. There's so many people to shout out. I usually go the other direction, and but I really just us, with Bill and some of my favorite parts of tonight. I'm sorry I didn't say much tonight, but I was listening. But it's just sort of bouncing ideas off each other, and sort of the community all working together to come up with some ideas about getting us ready and back to play. I just really appreciate us and our ability to collaborate and get back to playing rugby pretty soon. So thanks Bill and everybody on this call for working together to get us some rugby soon as soon as we can.
Fantastic. So yep. I'm gonna echo much of what was said, and Chris, and that's funny. I actually was really was gonna thank you all you guys for just continuing to have a lot of fun with me on this. Bill, thank you for coming on. It was great to have you, and I also want to shout out to my 8-year-old son who we told him that if he could catch any tadpoles or frogs or anything, a newt, we could call it science class and we'd let him keep it. um, and I don't know if you guys remember that snowfall we had recently. We went out on a nature hike, and all the reptiles were very cold and couldn't move very fast, and hence we now have a garter snake in the house. We have a green frog. We have a baby snapping turtle, which I said needs to go back very soon because I don't know if they're protected or not. We also have a couple of toads and tadpoles, and like we have a menagerie. It's absolutely ridiculous, and my wife is putting up with a bunch of reptiles in the house, including snakes and the other type aside from just me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Welcome to the farm life.
wild team in there, man.
Bearded dragon and the dog.
Yeah.
I want to, so I'll do my shout outs first. My first shout outs are to our rugby vendors. This has been devastating for a lot of business,
Oh, yeah.
and you can only imagine how, and we have some really good local ones. We have Ruggers, which is the brainchild of Vic Thomas, and then we had, we also have the luxury of having Rugby Imports, which was run by the great Bob Hoder. If you really kind of think about it, those guys have been awesome for our game to be local businesses. They rely on rugby being played, and to be forced into taking 3 months off with no income, or literally no income coming in for those guys. So I just want to send a shout out to those guys. I'm going to be doing something on my Rookie Rugby page to kind of send some shout outs to those guys. So if you guys have any business that you can send them your way, buy a ball, buy something, do that. I too want to thank Bill for coming on. I really do appreciate it. I've been very frustrated with the whole process and the lack of communication, but I think just listening to Bill's voice definitely soothes some of those fears and concerns that I had. And I hope that Bill comes on more frequently and when he can. I know he's very, very busy. For a guy who's retired, he's extremely busy. And so I always appreciate Bill's insights. He has a wealth of knowledge, and I think just hearing from you really calms the nerves. Because I think a lot of people in the rugby community were very, they're scared, they're nervous. I mean, it's first it was the bankruptcy, then it was COVID-19. So there's a lot of nervous people out there within the rugby community. So it's great to be able to hear your voice and know that things are gonna we're gonna be okay. So I really do appreciate that.
Absolutely. Here.
I hear. Yeah, so I mean, so my shout out is gonna first of all go to all the people working at the grocery stores. My guy at Subway that's been there every day, just barely breaking minimum wage, but been at work every day, been keep everyone fed through this. My second shout out is the Free Jacks for really staying the course and doing whatever they can. Just keep pumping out rugby related material to the community and keep the community involved and engaged in these really crazy times. And also, finally, so I want to give props to Bill for coming on. We were all really looking forward to it, and it's great to get the perspective, and have these conversations. I talked to you go through Myro and the calls we have through Myro, but a more relaxed in this conversation is very much appreciated. So thank you, and also to Daniel for putting this all together. This platform's been really productive and informative in ways that I can't think of any other platform would be. So thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah.
Lots of fun, guys. Lots of fun.
I'm gonna thank the New Zealand Rugby Union for giving me rugby in the near future because I'm in desperate need of that.
Here.
Yeah, everybody wants to see some.
I haven't had a live rugby game to watch since like the middle of March.
You know what I watched all day Sunday was ESPN was showing back to back across national championships. That's what I had to watch on Sunday. National championships.
Oh, I've just been watching replays of anything I can find.
Oh, it's so painful right now. It is so painful.
I want to give a shout out to Bill. Like everyone else said, I do appreciate you coming out and talking with us. It was good to have you here and what you had today. The other thing, just mention, I guess, a shout out. This past week, I was missing rugby like everybody is, so I grabbed my two youngest kids and we got on our bikes and biked to the rugby field. Hadn't been there in months, and they actually have the whole Rice complex closed for them anyway. But we went out in the pitch, and Alan and Daniel, I know at least you two have. I texted you pictures. Our fields were irrigated for the
So
fall.
gorgeous.
And yeah, I've always liked our fields. I mean, it's a nice spot, but man, it looks so good. So shout out to the people taking care of the fields here in Rentham. They're going to look great. And next time we can get out there and play and invite some friends over, it's going to be a proud moment.
Fantastic.
I'll make the drive down.
Excellent.
Oh yeah, it'd be awesome to hang out with you, Daryl. We'll hit the
Yeah.
pub afterwards, just right across the way.
Oh man, I still need a drink. Man. I'm sorry, I don't need a drink. I need socializing, man. I can
Yep.
see myself. I need socializing. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Daryl, just Saturday nights rugby watch party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Join us. We have a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, Skylar bringing a line of intelligence, then a bunch of old guys talking rubbish, and a rugby game in the background.
It's perfect.
Well
It
worth
really
it.
is very, very
So
good.
worth it. So much fun.
You always know who wins the rugby game because I picked it.
Because you picked the
Yeah,
game.
that's right,
Exactly.
yeah.
My team's gonna win.
All right, guys. Let's keep chatting, but I'm going to go ahead and bring the stream down because I think we've pretty much hit what we needed to hit for the stream. So from